When I think of biodiversity, one ecosystem that comes to mind is coral reefs like this one that contain such a vibrant assortment of organisms. You can see, for example, a bunch of species of fish. Like here's a species of fish, and there's a species of fish right over here, and there's another species of fish. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And we could play this game for a while. You could also see a bunch of species of coral. So here's one big old species of coral right over here. And then a completely different looking species of coral right here. And then yet another species of coral that's tucked back here. And if you look in between these species of coral, you might also spot a little sponge that's down in here. And even though you can't see them, don't forget for a moment all of the microorganisms that are up in the water column. So you've got bacteria, you've got zooplankton, you've got phytoplankton, all of these small microorganisms on which these larger organisms feed. And when a biologist sees all of these organisms in one place, they get really excited. Biodiversity is a very meaningful thing to biologists. And the point of this video is to try to examine why is it that biodiversity is considered so important. Now, before we know why it's so important, we first need to know what it is. So let's start right there. Biodiversity is the number of species in a given area. So if you were to take this lovely cartoon of a wetland here, and you can see a whole bunch of species. So got a moose, and looks like it's chewing on something, and then there's some pickerel weed that's right nearby, and looks like some sort of bee species that's coming around to pollinate that pickerel weed, and then some cattails that are over here on the side. You've also got a mosquito, a blue heron, which is feeding on some fish, and some ducks that are coming over to feed on the fish, and a turtle that might grab a duckling if it could, and a frog that's eyeing this mosquito, and the lily pad on which the frog is sitting, and then suddenly a beaver right here, and all of a sudden you realize there are just tons of species inside this wetland. And when a biologist sees all of these species, they know, for example, that this wetland is very healthy and very stable. And so they get all smiley inside. And that's part of what we're looking at today, is why is it that a biologist sees a wetland like this and starts getting really smiley? First thing, of course, is biophilia, the idea that organisms are cool. So bio means life. Phile is to love. So biophilia, that is the love of organisms. And if you're a biophiliac like myself, all you need to do is see a beaver and you just feel really, really happy. And same with a bee, same with a mosquito. Now, for those of you who see a bee and get terrified, or see a mosquito and get annoyed, there are other reasons that you might value biodiversity. Let's take biomimicry as an example. So biomimicry also has that same word root, bio, meaning life, and then to mimic something is to imitate it. So scientists, engineers, architects, and professionals in many other fields are developing lots of medicines, products, and buildings even based on organisms. So by studying the organism, they learn better ways to design their medicines, design their products, and to design their architecture. Now, lastly, and most importantly, we as a human species are quite dependent on all of the ecosystems in the world. These ecosystems, of course, they provide our food, they provide us with oxygen and a place to live and so on. And those ecosystems, in turn, depend on the biodiversity that's within them. So if anything is to happen to this biodiversity, then the ecosystems are in big trouble. And if the ecosystems are in big trouble, then so are we. So I'd like to start with an example of one really awesome, inspiring organism that might get some of you to feel a little bit more biophilia, and also is a perfect example of how biomimicry is used in medicine today. This rather innocuous-looking snail right here is called a cone snail. Now, when he's all in his shell, he really doesn't look that scary. When he starts to come out of his shell, he looks a little bit more intimidating. So you got some typical snail stuff. So you got a big foot underneath here, and you got some little eye stalks with eyes at the end, and a shell. You know, this is what most of the mollusks have. The thing that's a little bit unusual, though, is this long projection that's coming right out of the top of his head. So that's actually a mouth, and right inside is a proboscis with a rather nasty-looking structure built onto the end of it. These snails actually manufacture a harpoon-like hypodermic needle through which they inject venoms that they use to hunt fish. So, for example, you can see a picture right here of a cone snail that has stuck its long proboscis out and has harpooned a fish and then started to drag that fish back into its mouth. Now, this fish is currently completely immobilized. You can see its fins are stuck straight up into the water, so it can't swim a single bit. And by the time that fish gets dragged all the way down into the mouth, it is no longer able to send any signals to its muscles to get it to contract so it can swim away. So the snail was able to develop over evolutionary time some very interesting biological chemicals that could subdue the nervous system of this fish. And when biologists found this snail, they thought, oh, what can we learn about nervous systems? And what potential medicines could we develop based on the chemicals that could help us treat patients? So as a little refresher, inside our nervous systems and the nervous systems of fish, there might be the axon of a motor neuron that's taking a signal to contract to the muscle cell. And that muscle cell will contract, but it will only contract when its receptor receives a signal. So if there's an action potential that's traveling down that motor neuron, when it finally gets to the axon terminal, it actually results in the opening of a very special channel, a calcium channel. When calcium can diffuse into the cell, those vesicles filled with neurotransmitters can fuse to the axon terminal, and out come the neurotransmitters, causing the muscle to contract. Now, when the cone snail toxin is present and the action potential gets to the end, unfortunately, the toxin blocks the calcium channel. And when it does that, the calcium can no longer diffuse into the axon terminal. And of course, the vesicles then don't end up fusing with the axon terminal. The neurotransmitters don't get to the muscle cell, and the muscle cell is pretty much useless. The funny thing is, though, in humans, this exact same calcium channel is only found in some neurons, and specifically in sensory neurons that carry pain signals. Now, pain is processed by neurons in our central nervous system, and so here you have one such neuron that would actually, when it fires, tell our brains, ow, I'm hurting. Now, if we were to take some of this toxin and put it into somebody who's suffering from severe pain, then we're actually going to block these particular sensory neurons from sending the pain signal to the central nervous system, which means that their brains won't be able to sense pain even though their body might be hurting.